Yellowstone is one of the biggest national parks in America and one of the easiest places to waste an entire day. After spending 3 days exploring Yellowstone, I realized I would plan this trip completely differently if I went back tomorrow. I'm sharing the 8 mistakes I made, the things I wish I knew before I went, and the insider tips that will help you plan a Yellowstone trip that actually fits what you want to experience. Mistake number one is planning around attractions instead of experiences. When most people start planning a Yellowstone trip, they open up a map and immediately start making a checklist. Old Faithful, obviously. Grand Prismatic, definitely. Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, add it to the list. And I completely understand why. Yellowstone has so many famous places that it feels like it's your job to somehow squeeze all of them into one trip. The problem is, Yellowstone is not a park where the person who sees the most attractions wins. The best Yellowstone trip is the one that matches what you actually are looking to experience. For example, if you're going because you want to see wildlife, your trip should look very different from someone who wants to walk boardwalks and see geothermal features. If you love unique landscapes and strange geological features, then you're going to prioritize completely different areas of the park. If photography is your thing, the time of day you visit certain places can completely change your experience. If your dream is seeing bison, elk, or other wildlife, you need to be thinking about places like Hayden Valley and Lamar Valley and giving yourself time to actually watch what is happening around you. This is probably the biggest mindset shift I wish I had before going to Yellowstone. Stop planning your trip around a list of places. Start planning your trip around the experiences you would like to have. Because once you know that, everything else becomes easier. Where you stay, which entrance you use, how much driving you do, and what places actually deserve your time. Now, the next one is something I think almost every first time Yellowstone visitor is at risk of making. You start researching Yellowstone, and suddenly you have a list of 20 places you have to see. The problem is, not all of those places deserve the same amount of your time. Mistake number two is spending too much time seeing things that are basically the same. Okay, this one might be a little controversial because Yellowstone has so many incredible geothermal features. However, after spending time exploring the park, I realized I spent way too much time stopping at places that gave me a very similar experience. And I think this is one of the biggest traps for first time visitors. You see a list online that says, you need to see these 15 geothermal areas. And suddenly you're planning your entire trip around checking them off. The reality is, if you only have a few days in Yellowstone, you need to be selective. Because after seeing several geyser basins and thermal areas, some of them just start blending together. I remember getting to some areas thinking, okay, this is pretty cool. And then I would go to the next one and think, wait, didn't I just see something really similar to this? That doesn't mean those places aren't worth visiting. It just means your limited time is better spent on the areas that give you the experience you're looking for. For example, Midway Geyser Basin is absolutely worth prioritizing because of Grand Prismatic Spring. Seeing those colors in person is one of those Yellowstone moments where you just stop and think, how is this a real place? Mud Volcano was another one of my favorites because it felt completely different from the other areas. It was loud, dramatic, and almost felt like you were walking through a landscape that shouldn't exist. Norris Geyser Basin was also really unique because of the feeling you get walking through it. The landscape is so different that it almost feels like you stepped onto another planet. And then there's Upper Geyser Basin. This is where you get that classic Yellowstone experience. Obviously, seeing Old Faithful erupt is something that you don't want to miss. There's a reason it's famous. However, what surprised me was how much more there is beyond Old Faithful there. The boardwalks throughout the area allow you to see so many different features in one place, and you could easily spend several hours exploring. My favorite geothermal area was actually West Thumb Geyser Basin. Part of that is because it was my first real experience seeing Yellowstone's geothermal features, so it had an extra wow factor. However, what I really think makes West Thumb so special is the combination of everything happening in one place. You have colorful pools, geysers, and geothermal features right alongside Yellowstone Lake. You're looking at this beautiful lake while steam is rising from boiling springs right next to you. That combination is what makes Yellowstone so incredible. The lesson here is not that you should skip geothermal areas. The lesson is that you don't need to see every single one. Pick the ones that match the experience you're looking for, then use that extra time to explore another side of Yellowstone. If you're planning a national park adventure and you're feeling overwhelmed by where to start, I created a free national park starter guide that walks you through the process of planning an amazing trip. You can grab that at greatescapepodcast.com. Okay, mistake number three, not giving the right places enough time. One of the hardest things about Yellowstone is that there's so much to see that it feels wrong to slow down. You start thinking, if I spend 2 hours here, that's 2 hours I could have spent elsewhere. However, some places are worth slowing down for, and the trick is knowing which ones. For me, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone was absolutely worth seeing. The views are incredible, the waterfalls are beautiful, and it's one of those places where you really understand how diverse Yellowstone is. However, it wasn't a place where I personally needed to spend an entire day. I could experience the major viewpoints, take in the scenery, and continue exploring. Hayden Valley was similar. If wildlife is your priority, this area deserves your time. This is where you want to slow down, watch, and let Yellowstone happen around you. You might drive through and see nothing, or you might end up watching bison cross the valley and then suddenly forget you had anywhere else to be. That's one of the things I loved about Yellowstone. Some of the best moments weren't the things I checked off my list, they were the moments where I stopped and just let the park surprise me. If wildlife is what you came for, spend your time in wildlife areas. If geothermal features are your thing, spend more time exploring through those areas instead of rushing through. If photography is your thing, plan around the best light. The goal isn't to see the most things possible, it's to have the experiences you came to Yellowstone hoping for. And one place I would absolutely give yourself more time than you think is Old Faithful. A lot of people make the mistake of showing up, taking a quick picture, watching the eruption, and immediately moving on. I wouldn't do that. The eruption predictions are estimates, and mine ended up being 15 to 20 minutes later than expected. Give yourself some breathing room. Explore that area, walk all the boardwalks, see the other features nearby. Yellowstone rewards people who slow down. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make when planning Yellowstone is choosing a place to stay without really thinking through their itinerary. Mistake number four is underestimating how much your entrance and where you stay matter. And I get it, looking at a map, Yellowstone doesn't seem like it's that big. You see a bunch of roads, a few entrances, and think, okay, we'll drive wherever we want each day. Then you get there and realize Yellowstone is not a park where you can casually bounce around from one side to the other. The driving distances are real. For my trip, I came into Yellowstone from the south entrance after spending a few days exploring Grand Teton. From there, I stayed one night at Buffalo Crossing RV Park in West Yellowstone, then moved north and stayed the next 2 nights at Yellowstone RV Park in Gardner, Montana. That strategy helped me see a lot of the park without constantly driving back to the same place every night. And that's something I would really encourage you to think about when planning your own trip. Don't just pick a hotel or campground because it looks convenient. Look at the areas you want to explore and plan your lodging around that. If you want to spend your time around Old Faithful, Grand Prismatic, and the Upper Geyser Basin, staying near the west or south side of the park makes a lot of sense. If wildlife is your priority and you want easier access to areas like Lamar Valley, staying near the north entrance is going to make your mornings a lot easier. The best Yellowstone itinerary is not just about what you see, it's also about how much time you spend getting there, because every hour you spend driving back and forth is an hour you could have been exploring. Now, there is one mistake that can quietly ruin your Yellowstone trip without you realizing it until you're already there. You look at the map, you feel confident about your itinerary, and then day one happens and you realize you have accidentally planned a road trip instead of a national park adventure. Mistake number five, not understanding how much time Yellowstone driving actually takes. They look at the map and think, that's only 30 miles, we can easily fit that in. Except Yellowstone is not a normal road trip. You have winding mountain roads, you have wildlife slowing down traffic, you have people pulling over because they just saw a bison walking down the road, and yes, those bison traffic jams are absolutely a real thing. And to be fair, they're one of the coolest traffic jams you'll ever be stuck in. The biggest thing I did right on my trip was minimizing backtracking. I didn't plan my days by saying, what are all the things I want to see? I looked at the park and thought, how can I group these experiences together so that I'm not spending my entire vacation driving? That makes such a difference. A lot of first time visitors underestimate how exhausting Yellowstone can be because they're spending hours in the car between stops. And the crazy thing is that you have a day where you only drive 50 or 60 miles and it still feels like you covered a lot of ground because there's so much to stop and see along the way. The goal is not to see one thing on one side of the park and then immediately race across the park for the next thing. Group your experiences together. Give yourself buffer time. And remember, Yellowstone is not going anywhere. You can always come back in order to prioritize the time during your first trip. One of the coolest parts about Yellowstone is that wildlife is everywhere. Yet, mistake number 6 is assuming wildlife will just happen. I mean, I saw bison constantly throughout the park. At one point, it almost became normal to see them walking around, which is kind of hilarious because in most places, that would be the highlight of your entire day. However, there's a big difference between seeing wildlife and intentionally planning for wildlife. If wildlife is one of your top priorities, you need to build your trip around where those animals are commonly found and when they are most active. Hayden Valley and Lamar Valley are two of the most famous wildlife viewing areas in Yellowstone. Lamar Valley is especially known as one of the best places for spotting animals like bison, elk, and potentially wolves. Hayden Valley is another incredible area because the landscape itself is beautiful even when animals aren't showing up. And that's the thing about animals. You gotta slow down and give yourself time. Some of my favorite wildlife moments happened when I wasn't rushing to the next attraction. I saw a moose and her calf in a creek when I first entered the park from the south. I saw mountain goats near the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone area, which was such a cool surprise because I was not expecting that at all. Those moments are why Yellowstone is so special. You can plan the general areas where you'd like to look, yet you also gotta leave room for the unexpected. Mistake number 7 is only planning around the middle of the day. This one is easy to overlook because many people naturally plan their trips around convenience. You wake up, eat breakfast, head into the park, explore during the day, and leave. And while that sounds nice, Yellowstone is a completely different experience in the early morning and the evening. The crowds are different, the lighting is different, and the wildlife is different. Some of the most memorable moments in national parks happen when you're willing to be a little uncomfortable. Wake up earlier than you're used to. Stay out a little later than you'd like to. Because those are often the moments when the park gets to feeling a little bit more yourself. And especially for wildlife, those early morning and evening hours can make a huge difference. You don't have to spend every minute of your vacation waking up before sunrise. However, building in even 1 or 2 early mornings can completely change your Yellowstone experience. And this last mistake is the one that ties all of this together because it's the reason so many people leave Yellowstone feeling exhausted instead of inspired. Mistake number 8, trying to see everything. Yellowstone is so incredible that it feels impossible to leave anything out. You look at the map and think, I have to see all of this. The geysers, the waterfalls, wildlife, canyons, hot springs, and hikes. And then suddenly your vacation becomes a race. You're constantly looking at the clock. You're rushing through places that deserve more time. And you end up remembering the schedule more than the experience. The goal of Yellowstone is not to complete Yellowstone. You can come here multiple times and still discover something new. Instead, decide what kind of trip you'd like. Do you want incredible wildlife experiences or geothermal features or scenic drives and photography? Do you want hiking and adventure? And once you know that, your itinerary becomes so much easier to build. That's the biggest lesson I took away from my trip. The best Yellowstone trip is not the one where you see the most things, it's the one where you experience the things that made you want to come here in the first place. After spending 3 days exploring Yellowstone, I left feeling like I had only scratched the surface. And that's exactly why this is just the beginning of this Yellowstone series here on The Great Escape. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the Yellowstone experiences that are actually worth your time, the places I think should be at the top of your list, and the things I would absolutely prioritize on a first visit. So if Yellowstone National Park is on your bucket list, make sure you're subscribed because we have a lot more coming. And if you're ready to start planning your own national park adventure, don't forget to grab the free National Park Starter Guide at greatescapepodcast.com. Now go start planning that Yellowstone trip, and I'll see you in the next episode.